My name is David Spergel. Today we're going to be talking about workflows between Rhino, Revit, AutoCAD, and whatever other 3D. There are several other 3D applications too that we can talk about, but those are going to be the main ones. First, we're going to go over a little Rhino Grasshopper Primer. What is Rhino? Where does it fit into a workflow? How does Grasshopper fit? Then we're going to talk about what I think is very exciting new development, which is called Rhino Inside, and we'll talk about what it's inside when we get there, but it's inside a few things. And then we're going to talk about exporting models. So you have a model, now you want to get it somewhere else. How do you do that while preserving the 3D structures and integrity of the model? All right, so as the field of architecture gets more and more digitized, very often we have clients that use multiple applications in their workflow. Very rarely have I encountered a situation where they'll say, "Oh, we only use Rhino, we only use SketchUp or whatever." So it's becoming much more of a priority for these firms to think about how you're modeling it, how you get it from Rhino to Revit, how you get it from Revit to Rhino, AutoCAD, vice versa, while preserving the geometry, while preserving all of the editable features of the model. And what it really comes down to is choosing the right tool for the job. Some of Rhino's strengths is that it can be very flexible. So Revit is very constrained by certain parameters. Rhino doesn't necessarily have those constraints. So you're able to create unique forms, fabricate organic shapes. You're sort of not limited, but because of that limitation, it makes bringing it from Rhino into Revit a bit of a challenge sometimes. So it's also very adaptable. It's import, export almost any 2D, 3D format. It's expandable, and as we'll talk about later, where we go into some of the new upcoming features. It's got V-Ray capability, which is one of the most powerful rendering engines. It also has its own built-in rendering engine as well. And then if you're interested, it's got several different plugins for BIM integration, but we're also going to look at Rhino Inside, which we think will be very valuable for this feature going forward. It's also really fast. So the comparison I like to make is a sketchbook versus draft paper, things of that nature. So you have a little sketchbook, you can sketch real fast, and then when you're ready, you can bring your sketch into a real draft paper. Rhino in this case would be kind of like the sketchbook, and then when you're done, you kind of have to plan everything out and put it into Revit. That would be drafting paper in this analogy. Grasshopper, what is it? Basically, if you're familiar with Revit and some of the tools available to you there, specifically Dynamo, I would make that that's probably the closest approximation to what Grasshopper does. It's a visually scripting language, and it's a way to automate the 3D modeling and organization process within Rhino. So instead of clicking buttons and menus to run operations on the 3D model, you'll use Grasshopper to link these commands together. So imagine the process of modeling a fence. First you might start with trace the line on the ground that it's going to cover, and then you might create how high it is, how many posts it has, so on and so forth. And with Grasshopper, you can automate this process and define different parameters that you can modify in real time to create your model algorithmically. So gonna play a little video for you that I recorded, and as I talk over it, just wanted to try to avoid the pitfalls of live software demo, but we'll see later. So here you can see I'm drawing a little curve on this on the plane. On the left, you see the different Grasshopper parameters that I am working with. So here I am setting this curve as the input curve. So it's going to use this to base all of the future functions on. So right there's the live preview of my Grasshopper script. This is the fence that I was talking about before. So you can see the rails there are a little comically large, so I'm going to go ahead and change that. Scrolling over, And you can see all of these sliders are adjustable, right? So, it doesn't have to be sliders. You can have it be just a straight number input, drop downs. But basically, what this does is this inputs value and then does some process to it, and then you end up with this shape at the end. So you can see I'm changing the different radius of the posts, and there you have a fence on that profile that I drew. So this is a really good way of if there's something that you do a lot of, or if it really doesn't make sense for you to model this every time you want a fence, right? So this would be the solution there, and you can extrapolate this procedure to walls, doors, curtain walls, panels, whatever, anything you could think of. It's really kind of endless. Okay. And here's another quick one. This one just shows some of the different procedures you can do with Grasshopper, creating a really, more fixed surface, then making these little pipe elements. That was just a quick one showing the kind of freeform capability of Grasshopper. So that's a little bit of primer. Now we're going to get into the fun stuff, which is Rhino Inside. And before I had a slide that was, it had this and some other text around it, where it was really, sometimes when you're going from Rhino to Revit, Revit to Rhino, it feels like you're trying to shove a square peg into a round hole. But what if you could just make the square peg round, and then it would just fit perfectly? Well, that's kind of the situation that we're in now. So let me introduce a Rhino Inside. So let me pull this up. So a few things about Rhino Inside. It is an open source work in progress project. And basically it lets Rhino and Grasshopper run inside other applications. So the thing that I want to emphasize there is that they share the same memory space. So the same features that you are using or building in Rhino or Revit, it'll be able to read that without converting file formats, without exporting, importing. It's just all native. So it's possible to you can drive the host application with Grasshopper definitions. We can use the Rhino APIs in the host plugins, and we can also create native objects in the host application with Rhino and Grasshopper. So in order to use Rhino inside Revit, you will need to use the download and install the Rhino WIP version, which is the preview version 7 of Rhino, and you need a valid Rhino 6 license in order to do that. So you would just go over here to this page, download and install over here, and grab that from there. Once you do that, just go over to here to the GitHub page. This kind of gives you a good overview of all of the things that this tool is able to do. Grab the installer over here. It used to be it's really nice to have an installer now. It used to be we had to compile the build from the source code, so they made that a little bit easier for everyone to do themselves. And then you take a look. There's a bunch of different sample projects over here, and I'll show you a few that we've been working on over here. And Scott, you can feel free to jump in if there's anything I'm missing or anything like that, or I'll just
keep going. Right, it looks great.
Awesome, great. glad I got everything. So this is, you might remember our Revit sample project. We'll get back to this one in a little bit. Let me just open up a new file. Oh. Oh no. Okay. So wasn't planning on doing the live demo, but stuff is so cool that I had no choice. All right, bear with me. Okay, and the first thing I'm going to be showing is how to get your Rhino model into Revit. So first, let's do a 3D view so that we can be able to see this a little easier. Um, in your add-ins, once you install the plugin, it's going to show up right here. So here's my Rhino model that I want in Revit. Oop, lost it. Okay, never mind. So here she is. And then I loaded up my Grasshopper script, which if you'll notice, if you're familiar with Grasshopper, you might notice a new tab up there at the top, Revit. So here are all the different Grasshopper components that you can use to hook into Revit from Grasshopper. So you can pull out the geometry, filter by elements, and this is reading it all from the same memory space as our Revit file that is open in the back there. So it's, like I said, no importing, exporting. We're talking about like the same, they're reading the same language. So what we're going to do here is, here's our input for B reps, right? So we're going to map this at multiple B reps. Now we're going to go over here to our Rhino model, and we're just going to select all of the geometry that we want to put into our Revit model. And you can see, hold on, almost, get these posts. Great. And look at that. Now these are native Revit geometries. You can choose how they're mapped. So we just imported them as, what do we do, furniture. Okay, great, yes. So those are furniture. But really you can do, any category that you have in Revit, it'll read, and you can assign it to that category or family or whatever, however you want to structure that necessarily. You can do it by layer. So I know that one of the best practices is to kind of sort in Rhino by like walls, ceilings, floors, etc. by layer. You can import in that way, or however your file structure is. Doesn't really matter. So you can see here, these are all. And if we go back to Rhino, just want to show you that any changes that you make in this model will be reflected in the Revit model. So let's move this over here. Oh, you know what? I closed Grasshopper. That's what happened. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's move this over here. And now my geometry moved to match the Rhino model. And one more thing that I want to show you is let's close out of these. Let's unpin this guy, and we'll start from a fresh page. Come on. Okay, that's fine. If we hit this sample 8 button, we can load it directly. And now we have that whole file imported into our Revit model. And so those are just two different ways to accomplish a very similar task. There's several different sample scripts and files that come with Rhino inside. There's more being added all the time. We check back to the GitHub. You can see that it's not just Revit integrate into AutoCAD as well. Python, BricsCAD, JavaScript, Excel, Unity, Illustrator, anything you can think of. That's the progress so far. And now let's talk a little bit about once you got your models in Revit, how do you get them out? And why would you want to get them out? Well, the case that I'm talking about specifically is for model making or 3D printing. Very often, we'll be dealing with a model that someone comes to us with from Revit, says, well, we want to print this model, and thinks it's going to be just a simple export, throw it in the printer, and it's done. As many of you that may have tried this will attest, this is not necessarily the case. What wall thicknesses that you think are sufficient when you're looking at it on the screen, shrunk down to 3D print size, end up being paper thin. So let's talk about how we deal with that. Let's clear that out. There. Let's get a new file. Great. Okay. Okay. So everyone knows our favorite Revit sample file. Seen it a lot, so should be very familiar with it. That's why I picked it. So let's open up our Rhino and Grasshopper. Let's open up another script that we made. Revit to Rhino. All right, so let's arrange this. All right, everyone can see both windows. Yeah, it looks like it. Okay, great. So now you can see on this on our Grasshopper definitions, it's pulling all these categories from our Revit model, and you can drop this down and select whichever ones you want. We're gonna stick with. Actually, I do want walls. Walls is probably gonna be the first thing that we want, right? So let's grab walls from here. A little further. There we go. And now if I just hit this, look at that. Just took all the walls that we modeled in Revit, extracted them, and brings them right into our Rhino model. And now we do the same with roofs. It's a little bit more impressive if I turn the shading on. I think we're missing doors. Floors might be nice as well. Let's do that next. Whoop. Sorry about that. There we go. Got our floors, windows. And so the beauty of this is that one of the drawbacks of exporting from Revit is you get a lot of geometry that you don't really want. You're getting light fixtures, you're getting railings, and in this situation, what we're doing is really just picking and choosing the features and geometries that we want that we're going to print and leaving everything else out. So let's finish up with, did I do the curtain panels? I think I did the curtain panels. No, I didn't. Here we go. Okay, great. So now we have, kind of like the rough exterior of the model, which if you're 3D printing, that's really all that you need. You don't need the dining room table necessarily, or any of this stuff on the inside. So why bother? Let's see if there's anything else that we want to grab. I think that's good for now. So now from here, you have your model. Let's close out of this. And now we need to get this to the 3D printer. So all that we need to do from here is File, Save As, and we're going to save it as an STL for printing. We'll call it and now let's open that back up and we'll take a look at it. Yes, that's the process of getting your model out from Revit into Rhino. And from here, you can do whatever you want with it. Set it up for a V-Ray render, 3D print it. And again, this is a work in progress feature. That means that new abilities and features are being added to it all the time. Again, you need a valid Rhino 6 license in order to install Rhino inside, and you also need to download the Rhino 7 Serengeti build of Rhino, which does have some other nice features such as sub-D modeling.